because of the course you're taking, but also I hope there are guests from outside. Is Vadim here? Oh yes, sorry. There are three Vadims. So Astghine Pasoyan, a very old acquaintance, almost like 6-7 years now. I've known her. She's very active in the field of energy efficiency. She was one of the first people in Armenia to push this agenda forward, and she found a resonance mostly in other parts of the world, but increasingly Armenia is becoming focused on energy efficiency as a way of meeting its energy demand, energy needs, and energy production, reducing its requirements for production. And as an indication, we're honored to have Deputy Minister Agribusiness here with us. He has made it his own agenda to make this a priority issue for the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. And we're honored to have you here with a wealth of experience that you bring with you, and we're eager to learn. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. It's the honor is all mine, actually, because talking in front of an academic auditorium is not only an honor but a challenge, because and I welcome that. I'm teaching for 13 years now. I teach resource economics and environmental economics. And one of the things I tell my students is, please disagree, challenge. Take my theory apart, ask me questions, make it yours. But that's the concept, okay? So I'm not here to just lecture. If we can make this interactive, that would be just great. The topic is a bit, focused on the finance. So if those of you that don't have a finance background have a hard time understanding, ask questions. We don't need to keep it formal, like I said. All right? So I've been working in this field for now 20 years. Like Alan said, I'm an old acquaintance, so that gives me a few gray hair and the permit to talk about this. I'm a graduate of local economics university and also Brown University with a master's degree in environmental economics. I've been watching AUA from the first day, so you being here, thank you very much. I thought you just heard my name and the topic, that's why you came, but now I also know you're here for the class, so you can't leave. You have to sit through and listen to me, which is, I hope that you will also enjoy it. So what we're going to talk about today is finance. Have people heard about energy efficiency? Do you know what energy efficiency is? Why do we save energy? Talk to me. Yes, no, so that I can move forward. Otherwise, we're just going to sit quiet. Yes, no, interactive. You know what energy efficiency is? Okay, great. So I'm now going to talk about what energy efficiency is. I'm going to talk about why finance it and how, okay? The problem is that right now, this is how much financial resources we have for energy efficiency. How much energy efficiency financing do we actually need to be economically viable and make a decent, tolerable impact on our environment? The early assessment was this much, about a double. But now when they look at the global climate change and say, hey, we can't keep doing this because then the average climate is going to increase by about 4 degrees in 100 years. This means irreversible climate change with such ramifications that the world will never be the same. So we need to be doing more to slow down climate change, which means we need this much financing, 8 times more than we actually have right now, right? So why worry about financing and how we can do it, right? And I'm going to talk about 2 vicious circles. The topic is large, and we're going to talk about buildings today, because buildings have been rated by McKinsey International. Those of you that read any academic literature, McKinsey is one of the leaders in economic analysis. McKinsey says that the primary, the most cost-effective, the most attractive sector where you can put your money to have the fastest and easiest payback is buildings. In the world, if you want to have resource efficiency, McKinsey is the sexiest sector, basically. Now, what's the problem with financing energy efficiency in buildings? There are 2 vicious circles, and they're different for public sector versus residential sector. In public sector, problem is that in most cases, imagine if this is a public university, right? State university or something. We, the people who use it, we, the people who consume energy in this building, would be disconnected from people who pay the bills. Like Ministry of Education pays the bills. but the people operating the university decide how much energy gets used. So the key problem to vicious circle is split incentive, because the payer of the bill wants to reduce the bill, but those who consume the energy don't care, because if they save energy, there's nothing that's going to go into their pocket as a result. So this results in high energy bills and high energy costs for the public sector, becoming a real burden for the public sector. When we look at the residential sector, the story is completely different. People living in a residential building, multi-apartment residential building, raise a hand. 1, 2, okay, that's a lot, right? Now, you own your apartment together with your family, right? You probably also know that you own the staircase, the roof, and the basement. That's shared, distributed ownership of a common resource, right? If you look at any resource economics, or if you study resource economics, you learn that anything common is destined to tragedy of commons. Because something that's common, we say we own it, but when the time comes to take responsibility and actually take care of it, we fail. So we all consume the resource, but we never take care of it, right? Which is why our staircases are dirty, our roofs have holes in them, right? The windows are broken, the doors never close, and the whole thing also for energy efficiency. So our buildings have this problem that we have this common management scheme. Anybody heard about condominiums? I want you to submit condominiums, homeowners associations, okay? There's a big problem. Homeowner association wants to save energy. They need money for that. It's a financing problem. You go to them, they say, we don't have money. You go to the members who need to pay them, they say, they haven't ever done any work that I like. Why would I pay them? As if you come to me and say, you're my professor, I don't like your lecture, so I'm not going to pay you. I'm like, well, you didn't pay me last semester, so I'm underpaid, I'm not happy, I'm not doing my work. So if people stop paying for the services, the service vendor eventually degrades and does the work poorly. This is what happens in the residential sector. It's a, chicken and egg problem. You don't pay, they don't work, you don't pay, and it becomes the second vicious circle, which would magically be solved if the money came from elsewhere in the beginning. The financier would actually give funds to get the work started, show you can do work, like I'm here, for example, to show you what I can do, and then you would decide if you want to pay the services of this homeowner association. This and a zillion other barriers create a slow uptake of financing in the market for energy efficiency. So today we're going to talk about 4 things, major types of finance. By major, I'm going to probably only talk about the top 30% because there's a lot and we only have 60 minutes. But then I'll list them so that you can investigate them for your own. And second is the partnership opportunity. So if this problem in a public sector doesn't get resolved, how do we pull in other partners that can help solve it? Then we'll talk about approaches to assess projects' potential to get financed, and then the case for Armenia to make it applicable to our reality. Very often, people say, I have a good project, there's just not a good financier to take it up and finance it, right? It happens, a lot in my practice. I've done this really great energy audit, and I have an incredible project, but there's no bank that would finance it. In theory, that's a good approach, right? I've done all it takes to do attractive, cost-effective project, and it's the bankers, the financiers that are bad. They don't like my product. But what you usually do in a market economy, you don't make the client like your work. You tailor your product to the client, right? For example, if you make clothes that are your unique fashion, and you make people buy it, but it's not, people don't like it, aren't you going to eventually tailor to their taste? That's the same concept in financing. You first think about an opportunity, then you look at the financial tools and try to understand what are the existing financial processes, the existing financial products that can meet your needs. Then you analyze their requirements. Then you see whether you fit or not in this process. Then you design your project to that particular financier. I know it doesn't make a lot of people happy because you make compromises. But if I today decide to finance, solar water heaters and solar photoelectric energy for the residential sector for heating of common spaces, my project would probably be suicidal. This is not the sector where it's cost effective right now. We need to do it elsewhere right now. So I may go with the same technology, but offer it for another sector. This way, the engineers, the economists, and the bankers can actually talk and understand each other. It's incredible how they speak different languages, but they do. So the technical side should make a compromise. On the other hand, we train the bankers all the time. I train bankers 3 times a week to make sure that we at least come to a common language. Now, we're going to talk about several groups. We'll talk about budget appropriation when it's budget finance, public municipal budgets. Second is grant financing. Everybody loves grant financing for scholarships, for investments, like everybody loves grants, right? We'll talk about pros and cons. Then debt financing, when you actually need to borrow money to do something. Then we'll talk about getting private sector or some other third party to finance your projects, and other hybrids, okay? Public finance from state budgets or municipal budgets are called internal appropriation, when you actually have the equity and you get the money from your internal sources and you direct it to either fully finance the project. Well, that's a piece of cake. For example, you know, I'm in a country like the municipality of Belgrade had a lot of funds. It decided that it's just going to do energy efficiency in the municipality of Belgrade, and they did it from start to finish its internal appropriations. Sometimes what they do is they prefer to use it as a supplement to get loan financing or other financing, saying, you know, if you do this, municipality of Yerevan does this. If you give us grant money, we will co-finance it from our side by 30%. This is, you know, leveraging. I show some of my own initiative to make sure I attract other financing. Then there's mandatory seed financing sometimes. You need to get something started and there's need to start up. Like I talked about homeowner associations. If somebody would put in, and we've experimented with this with 4 micro-lending revolving funds for homeowner associations. You put the seed money in, you know, seed is basically the startup. And then people take and return. The problem is getting the first tranche rolling. And that's what seed financing does. It's ideal if it comes from a budget. And in the absence of other low-cost financing, that's the only choice very often. So looking at, you know, that's if your public partner, municipality or the state government actually has money. Second process is grant financing. Like I said, people love grants. I want to talk about grants and I want to be a little critical. What my colleagues have taught me from the World Bank years back is you can only grant finance projects if they have 2 features, either a demonstration or a pilot. And I've said this so many times that I get into arguments with donors because of this. What's a pilot project? That you know, no, well, let's talk about demonstration first. Demonstration means, you know, word-to-word translation. That means you're going to demonstrate this incredible, innovative solution, technical or financial, and you're going to show the world that this is viable. This is, you know, just brand new discovery. And then everybody gonna look at that and they're gonna say, okay, I'm gonna do this. This works, this is perfect. And just by that demonstration, you step aside and it rolls, it happens everywhere. This is where you can actually use grant financing. That's demo project, demonstration project. Pilot project is another area where you can use a grant money. When you actually, for example, have a big credit resource, like $8 million, and you have thought very thoroughly how you're going to spend this money, and you're going to do just 1 or 2 pilot cases to test your own approach. You know, how you're going to land, how much grant there's going to be, what technical solution you're going to apply, and all of that is your own experiment. It's not innovation, you're just experimenting with a scheme, you learn from it, you document it, then you use your rest of the money to follow your own successful scheme. Pilot, basically that's your experiment. You've tested, you've corrected your scheme, and then you again roll out. Unless you have any one of these, demonstration or a pilot effect, using grant money is actually a problem for a market. Because when you grant fund one thing, or a second, or even 20, you're probably not prepared to fund all of it. You know, can we finance all the energy efficiency needs of Armenia? Impossible. There's not such capital in Armenia for that.
So if we do grant financing, we send a signal to the market that don't worry, money is coming. So if I do something on your building, you get grant funding top to the last, from ground to the last floor, and then you're going to think, okay, great, my building is energy efficient. What's your neighbor building going to think? I'm like, oh, this is going to happen in my building someday. So I'll just wait. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to wait for my grant. So grant financing can be a problem for the market because it's a sort of a subsidy. Unless you have a demonstration potential or a pilot project where you are going to replicate your own project, grant financing is going to be an issue. All right, so going forward to debt financing, when people actually have to borrow. The quick list is bank loans, project finance, and bonds. Okay, so I don't have much time to talk about different kinds of debt financing, but bank loans in the beginning, it's a bank loan, right? You draw loans to go to school, you draw loans to buy a car. It's all forms of loans. And then project finance is different from loan finance. Energy efficiency is a different kind of loan. For example, if you buy a car, you're going to graduate, you're going to start making tons of money, and one day you're going to go to a car, showroom and buy a brand new car that's just straight out of the factory, right? You're going to pay whatever it takes with a loan financing, for example. And the next morning, your car is going to be cheaper. Why? Because it's not brand new anymore. Every other kilometer you ride, your car is getting cheaper. Most of the assets do that. They depreciate. When you draw a loan to renovate your house, the next morning your child or your nephew comes and scrambles on the wall, your renovation loan started depreciating. Energy efficiency loans are different. You draw the loan, you invest. From the moment of investment, you make money. You start earning on it. Which is why it's not really a loan finance, it's a project finance. It's like business development lending. You borrow, you invest, and you start earning from it. It's not like you borrow and you need to earn elsewhere to repay your loan. Which is why project finance is what works best for energy efficiency, but the banks don't like it. Banks don't like it because they don't get it. They don't understand. And you go talk to them about project finance, and at the end they say, yes, but I'm going to need a pledge, a collateral. You understand? You know what's a pledge? Collateral. Something you put down to get money. Okay, you claim collateral, security. The problem is for energy efficiency, your security is the cash flow. The money your project is going to earn is the security. It's going to make you repay from savings, right? Now, bonds is a more unique kind of instrument, which is not really working in Armenia right now, but there are no really legal barriers for this. When a municipality, for example, decides it wants to invest in energy efficiency, but it doesn't have the money. What it does, it says, I'm going to sell securities, bonds. My citizens are going to buy these bonds, and I'm going to pay them dividends. Out of what? Out of the savings that I'm going to make by earning on energy efficiency projects. Now, special case for loans. Understanding the need for energy efficiency, and also all these ancillary benefits, the environmental, social, and other benefits. They create soft loans, specially designed for energy efficiency. They're usually priced below market rate. They're extended in their repayment period. They may have a grace period, subsidies on certain things. Sometimes also combined with technical assistance, like they'll do the energy audit for you. They'll help you calculate your issues, do some administrative support, etc. And this gradually becomes a dedicated credit line at times. Basically, if you go to a regular bank and want a loan for example, municipal kindergarten energy efficiency, the bank will need to do a lot of work to even start understanding your conditions. Which is why when these are so specific projects, they're better off in a dedicated, separated credit line where the terms and conditions are tailored to the needs of the sector. And I'm going to throw some case studies in from the countries that I've worked in. I've been the regional manager for Southeast European CIS for a great American think tank called Alliance to Save Energy since 2001. And most of my work is in the West Balkans and CIS countries. Ukraine, one of my favorite places. This is one of the examples of World Bank projects. They decided to retrofit 1,270 public buildings and the annual energy reduction in consumption was 26%. Ukraine has a serious energy security issue. It imports a lot of Russian energy, which is part of the reason why all Maidans are happening all the time. The financing was seed financing. Remember I talked about seed financing. It was pitched to them by the World Bank to set up this financing facility, and the project components were by the World Bank. There was do all the energy audits. This is the technical assistance. And then do the energy efficiency improvements in buildings and get some savings. The net present value was $11.2 million, which was a little less than half of the project, and the internal rate of return 26.6, which basically says your projects usually get back to you, in terms of savings within 4 years or so. Now let's talk about guarantees. In a situation where your financier doesn't know much about the sector, they're afraid of the risks. Okay, what if I finance this and the savings don't happen, or the beneficiary, the borrower, doesn't do it right and they cannot repay my loan? This always happens when the loan sector is new. What do you need to do? You need to help the bank, the financier, understand that the risk is not really there. Talking to them doesn't help. They want guarantees. Imagine yourself going to the bank and say, I have this incredible, brilliant business idea. I want a loan and I'm going to start this business, and whatever it is, it's a genius project. The problem is, to the bank, you're just a student. And what they're going to do is they're going to look at you, they're probably not going to understand your project, and they're going to ask you if somebody from the family can, undersign the loan. Give them securities. If something goes wrong, there's a guarantor standing behind your back to back you up, right? I know it doesn't, sound right, but very often when they don't understand the client, they don't understand the project, they want help being safer to mitigate the risk, right? So this is why guarantees are important. Guarantees are not to finance the project. Guarantees are to give the banking sector, the financiers, a sense of security about the risk. These are usually temporary. What happens when we set up a guarantee facility, for example, with the US Treasury, in some countries we've set up development credit authorities, DCAs, or in Bulgaria there was a World Bank guarantee. IFC set up guarantees in Macedonia. What this is that they set up a guarantee facility, and here's the deal. You finance an energy efficiency project, the bank would give the loan, the borrower would take the loan, do the work. If for some reason the project goes wrong, the guarantor will repay the loan in an agreed terms. For example, usually it's up to 50%, not the whole loan, but 50%. When the lender has 50% guarantee, that's already a lot of sense of security. The risk is smaller, the risk premium is smaller, interest rate is smaller, because risk is what makes money expensive, because they're taking with the risk. So sometimes there will be still requirement for a small collateral. One of the success stories is the Bulgarian Energy Efficiency Fund, which also had guarantees associated, and it actually lends up to 70% to public buildings. When they introduced guarantees, their ESCO scheme started working. I'm going to talk about what ESCO is, Energy Service Companies, in a minute. And now private sector. I talked about public sector, municipal sector, loan guarantees, etc., etc. But where is most of the money? It's in the private sector. The reason why we like to think about energy efficiency in partnership with the private sector is because private sector is a better manager. In all of the classical economics and neoclassical economics, you're always going to hear that state is a bad manager. Public sector is a bad manager. All those state enterprises that in the Soviet Union were managed by the state had losses, had a lot of stealth, and a lot of other efficiency issues. Whereas when they're privatizing, bringing private sector participation, things start functioning, efficiency comes into the play, because public has other priorities, social, environmental, development, etc. And business, in a sense of minimizing costs and maximizing profits, is not always a high priority for the state. So bringing in a private partner usually helps with efficiency, which is what we see in our power sector. When they privatize, bring in private operators, The losses go down in most sectors, not everywhere, sometimes the private operator can be better. But in most cases, private operators are more profit-oriented and they're becoming more efficient. So for private financing, there are 3 schemes we're going to talk about. Third-party financing, which means, I'm the owner, there's a financier, but I bring in a third party to take the money and invest, or somebody third comes with his own money. Leasing, there's types of leasing, like vendor credits, etc., when you actually can't buy the equipment, so you have a deferred payment plan with the vendor of the product to do the leasing. And public-private partnerships, where both the public sector remains in the game, and bring in the private player to be on a certain parity and jointly do the project. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about that in terms of ESCOs, energy service companies. Energy service companies develop, design, and finance energy efficiency projects in theory, which means they should be the ones worrying where to get the money. In a classical scheme, an ESCO company would, find a partner, Bosnia, for example. In Bosnia, we have this ESCO company. They found a kindergarten. They designed a project to reduce their energy bills. They installed and maintained the equipment. They measure, monitor, and verify the savings. And then they get paid from savings. But they raise the financing on their own. They get to the bank and borrow the loan. So this is classical. As a result, the ESCO bears all the risk in this case, right? If I'm the ESCO and I promise AUA that I will do energy efficiency and reduce AUA's bills, and I will only get paid if I do the savings, if I fail, I don't get paid. So if I go to a bank, take a loan to do energy efficiency in AUA, and I know there are people here who have taken care of this already, so it's a hypothetical example. If my project fails, I can't repay the loan to the bank, so I bore the financial risk, and I lost. Okay. Energy service performance contracting is the contractual scheme through which ESCOs work with public partners. Well, it could be another private partner, with a company, big industrial enterprise, or SME, etc. It's a contract between the client, for example, that kindergarten, and the contractor, that's the energy service company. ESCO carries all these agreed tasks that are written in a contract. I'll do the audits, I'll do the retrofits, commissioning, designs, maintenance, monitoring, and verification. ESCO would finance the investment, get the money from own equity or a bank loan or something, and then repays this investment through savings. ESCO is also responsible for meeting targeted reductions, while the owner just benefits. The kindergarten just gets the savings and gets more comfort and reduced energy bills. There's a process. This is the process. You first do the energy audit, then you get the project approved, you sign the contract, then you do the engineering work, develop the project by the ESCO, then the project gets accepted and implemented and accepted as a result of your monitoring and verification findings. Now, financing from savings is the theory why this can work. Remember I said, by investing in energy efficiency, you're earning money. So ESCO companies believe in earning the funds with energy efficiency, so they invest to make profits on energy efficiency. There's 2 options in here. Here's the option number 1. Here's our energy bills. In most cases, energy bill in an average enterprise building, etc., gradually goes up. Why? Because energy price always goes up. In Armenia, there's every 3 to 4 years the energy prices jump, and if you just, smoothen this, do some regression analysis, something, you do with your statistical software, you're going to get 14 to 19% increase in energy prices on an annual basis, which means there's a smooth growth in your energy bill and energy consumption as well, because winters get colder, summers get warmer as a result of climate change. With the growing affluence of the population, we all want better comfort, we all have more gadgets, we just had heating in the past, now we also have air conditioning, so energy bills grow. What an ESCO would come sometime here, they would say, okay, we've already monitored your first 5-year performance. What I'm going to do after the 5th year, for example, I came now, and I offer that We sign a contract, an ESCO contract, Energy Services Performance Contract, or Energy Performance Contract, EPC. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce your energy bills. They'll still grow, but not as high as they could have been in the absence of energy efficiency. Then, this is going to be your saving between year 5 and year 10. In a guaranteed savings, I guarantee you this, okay, the savings. And as a result, you pay me a cost. I've guaranteed that much, and the cost savings would be paid to the ESCO in return for their services. Then the ESCO would walk away, and the company would remain with this savings just for itself. You understand? The municipality, the kindergarten, the hospital, they paid the ESCO out of this savings, and they remained with savings afterwards without need to pay the ESCO after the 10th year. Okay? The ESCO has paid off its costs and made some profit, so it makes sense. This is guaranteed savings. There's also shared savings when they decide, okay, I'm not going to pay anybody anything, but what we're going to do is we're going to get some savings and we're going to share that between the public agency and between the ESCO in compensation for their services. In both of these cases, if the savings do not happen, ESCO doesn't get completely paid. I know in theory, when I was writing about this 7 years ago or 8 years ago, we would recommend energy service performance contracts for the rest of the world in our region, Southeast European CIS, saying this is what the future is for public-private partnerships. Now, with the years of experience and some gray hair, I already know this doesn't really work. Even when I talk to Canadian ESCO, French ESCO, they're saying, don't blame your local ESCOs. You're saying they're poor, they can't come up with financing. If you look at ESCOs in Armenia, they cannot probably draw a big loan to invest in energy efficiency. Or even they can draw the funds, they will not invest in a kindergarten or something because of the risks. They would invest in something else. Even the largest Western, well-established rich ESCOs are very careful and cautious about financing themselves. They want to be supported. So the recent thinking in this sector is this isn't really working. The advantages are great, the public sector doesn't worry about this, the risk is borne by the private sector, energy efficiency is safe, the risks are integrated and internalized, the risk is transferred, that's all that matters. And the ESCO has all the incentives to come up with the best technical solution with the monitoring, etc. So the public sector needs not worry. Because 7 years ago, I was looking only from the public sector's perspective because, I was helping governments write laws and policies, so I was only public-oriented. When I started talking to the private sector, they say, why would I care about your kindergarten so badly that I risk my business into it? It's expensive and it's dangerous and there are a lot of risks. Now, what if your public agency doesn't get the funding this year from the state budget? What if the climate fluctuations happen? It's a warm winter. What if, and there's a long list of what ifs. So ESCOs don't really like taking this full risk. First of all, there's a big contracting effort. They need to do the audit, the project development, a lot of work before they get the contract. And ESCOs say, what if the public agency walks away? And it happened. You help the public agency do the project, spend a lot of engineering hours, and as a result, what happens is they walk away from you, and they go and do it themselves. So the ESCO has a lot of risks. So especially for a small project, it's a big administrative effort, and it may not be materialized. And a lot of countries in our region have been looking for an alternative and didn't find one. And I would probably today report about a success story from Armenia, how they fixed this, because it's the only place they did. Because of the time constraints, I'm going to skip some of the examples and talk about a little more on financing schemes so that we can come to the Armenian case later. One special mention of revolving funds. Self-sustaining revolving funds is what is the future of energy efficiency financing. If I say I have grants or I have other forms of financing, I'm just going to restrain myself to financing all the projects that fit into my budget. The point is, not to stop the financing and have a multiplier effect, which in theory means that when your project is funded, the savings should come back so it can lend for something else. This way, it will be self-sustaining, continuous process, and your financing will not stop. So revolving funds are incredible, especially if they're designated just for one sector to fix the issues in one sector. It's hard to set them up. It requires legal support, it requires government political will, especially if they're large scale, require sovereign loans and guarantees. But once they're set up, they're very viable, sometimes also have an expensive administrative effort. So I'm going to talk about that for Armenia. Now, where does Armenia stand in this energy efficiency story, right? We can proudly report we're probably doing better than most CIS countries and some of the West Balkan, Central and Eastern European countries as well, in terms of investment framework. We actually do have a law on energy saving and renewable energy, which I was proudly involved with, and that was in 2003. So that was 12 years ago. Then our energy is metered at the end use. Until very recently, many countries in our region didn't meter their gas consumption, electricity consumption, and heat. In Armenia, everything is metered at end use: water, gas, and electricity. Government has actually looked at the building sector and says, it is in a bad condition. They say most buildings are 30 to 60 years old. 94% of them are in bad or satisfactory condition. 60% need investments right now. So this is where our building sector stands. There's actually money in terms of financing. There's EBRD, KfW, IFC, GGF, and French Development Agency, who have all sorts of credit lines for building energy efficiency. The problem is that some of them are too lazy to do anything in the public sector or common sector. Basically, the easiest thing is to lend for households. I give you the loan, you get yourself a heating system, I call it energy efficiency, and I report to the European Union that I've done some environmental projects. That's easy. But going to public buildings, for those that remember split incentives, when the owner and the operator of the building are different people, or go to a residential building and actually fix something in a common space where there's strategy of commons. Nobody wants to get into that. It's too many, too little, it's complicated, a lot of administrative barriers, a lot of risks. So most of this do just household lending or SMEs, private sector where the property and ownership is clear, there are no gaps and vague territories. One thing that's actually great is the JEF-funded Public Building Energy Efficiency Lending Scheme that started operating since 2013 and which created a success story in our region. This is not my story to tell because this is a fund which is operational, and we've talked to the director. She promised she'll do a special case for you and speak about it separately. But as a board member on that fund, I'm authorized to speak about it just a little bit, right? So we're actually, just to mention, there's only one source of financing for condominiums, homeowners association, that can borrow loans to energy efficiency, not just a house, apartment, but outside in a common space. Now, what I also want to mention, and this is a growing sector, while even in the worst financial crisis years, 2009, 10, and 11, our construction sector has been growing. While in good years it grows about 28%. And majority of this new construction is actually non-energy efficient. Most of them do not comply with basic energy efficiency requirements in construction. So this market of non-energy efficient buildings is still blooming, and luckily, December 25 last year, the government adopted Decree 1504, which says that energy efficiency requirements are mandatory for compliance for all state-funded or sovereign loan-funded projects and new residential construction. So hopefully that will stop happening. Now, what are the financing mechanisms in Armenia? I mentioned IFIs, international financial institutions, donors, lending usually packaged with some consultancy, training, and project preparation, like energy audits for SMEs and big enterprises. There's grant components for households. If they borrow for energy efficiency, they may get up to 10% grant money back. Depends on the lender. And guarantee schemes are not available. When we say no guarantees, all these risky territories stop working, because the financial sector is not comfortable. They would give you a loan for a heating system. They would give you a loan for SME energy efficiency because there's no risk. They'll take your apartment as mortgage, as a security. They will take your business, some collateral from your business. When there's no collateral, there's no business, they don't do this because they don't see your other income. Now, what do we do in the absence of guarantees? Ideally, we set up guarantees when we can. I talked about guarantee funds, if you remember. And in the absence of guarantees, somebody else needs to share the risk, help us out. So I'm going to talk about Armenian Renewable Resources and Energy Efficiency Fund, which was established by Article 6 of our energy saving law. And it has many objectives to support renewable energy development, energy efficiency, etc. And this one wing of its work is focusing on reducing energy consumption in public buildings. There's funding of about $9.8 million. Beneficiaries are public and municipal agencies. Typical measures are insulation, reduction of window size, replacement of heating system, replacement of street lighting systems, etc. On average, they invest about 7,200 drums per square meter. As a result, they get energy saving of 54.4%. You realize what this means in terms of a bill? For a hospital, for a school, for a kindergarten, 54.4%. It's half your bill, okay? Do you see a cash flow out of this? The savings mean you don't spend that much on energy. What's incredible, as compared to Ukraine, for example, or Russia, our public agencies have very flexible funding. A school gets funding per pupil. A university gets funding per student. Hospital gets per patient bed. Which means if they save, they're going to keep the savings. For example, if you're a Ukrainian school, if you save on the energy bill, you get less money to pay your energy bill. So the school doesn't really care about energy saving because it gets less money from the ministry. In Armenia, saving on the energy bill means the school, the other municipal public agency, can actually relocate those funds to take care of something else. So there's incentive to save, right? Heating goes from 120 kilowatts per square meter per year to 50. And CO2 emissions reductions, I know you don't really care, but this is mattering for climate change, goes down from 471.8 tons a year to 218. So that's more than half, right? Now, how does this work? It took me a lot of inspiration to actually draw this for you because this scheme doesn't exist. It's a complicated scheme. Remember I said ESCO doesn't work in Southeast Europe, and we struggled over this a lot. With the World Bank, with World Bank Institute, with USAID, we've been thinking about what to do to make the ESCO work, and really brilliant people from the World Bank figured this out for Armenia. So here's how it works. Our revolving fund is this R2E2, Renewable Resources and Energy Efficiency Fund, that has funds, seed money. Remember I talked about seed money. So every term I use during the first 40 minutes, I'm going to try and apply on this scheme. Seed money came from Armenian government borrowing, the Ministry of Finance taking a loan from IDA, International Development Agency, and putting it into R2E2 saying this shall revolve until 2045, okay? This is our revolving fund. The money goes into the fund and it shall revolve. There's grant money for technical assistance because you need to do energy audits, you need to do analysis, you need to pay the salaries of R2E2 staff, right? And then what R2E2 does, it wants to do energy efficiency in public and municipal agencies. But how do we do it? Does R2E2 directly finance it? This money will never come back. What it does, they invented this substitute for the ESCO contract called Energy Saving Agreement. Energy Saving Agreement basically said it's a deferred payment, it's not really a loan. Basically, we are giving you this sort of subvention. You get these funds to your hospital, for example, and you promise to return these funds under certain terms in a slow period of payments from your savings. Here's how it works. Well, because this entity also, remember, public is a bad manager, so this hospital cannot really do good energy efficiency on its own, do the procurement, do the outsourcing, find the right contractor. So R2E2 does this for them. They first audit the building, then they identify what project can really work in this case, and then they develop the contract. As a result, they also come up with a procurement scheme. They advertise the contract saying, the company that can come for this hospital and offer the best technical solution with best NPV, quickest payback system, the most attractive financial and technical performance, shall get this contract. We'll pay you to do the work, okay? So this is where ESCOs come about. Companies that need to provide energy saving, energy services, right? The contract for this company is an annex to this company, right? To this contract. What happens is this company wins the tender, comes and does the energy savings. How do we make sure that, we don't do guaranteed savings and shared savings contracts, but we still make them save and keep their promise? Their payments are linked to the savings. They first get about 50%, I don't remember the numbers, some of the bulk of the money upfront to get started. When they complete the work, they get paid with the second tranche. When the first heating system is operated and everything is functional, they get the third tranche. And once in year one later, their savings are monitored and verified, and it's obvious that the savings are being delivered, they get the final piece of money. The great thing about this, the ESCO is interested to factually deliver the savings so that the cash savings happen, materialize, right? So this is what ESCO will do, otherwise it doesn't get paid the full contracted amount. Now, how do we make sure the savings don't get lost? This public, municipal agency, hospital, kindergarten, school, whatever, establishes this repayment account, a separate bank account, where every month in the winter, they put funds just in the size of their last year's utility bill, heat bill from last year, or average year, okay? For example, it was 100% like last year. They put that money in here, but remember there was 54.4% average savings. So they don't need the 100 units to pay the bill. Out of here, the utility bill is paid, which is now on average about 46%, and the remaining is the savings, the cash that we were trying to achieve. And this cash goes back to repay the loan. What was the need to be done is take the risk off of the public entity and the ESCO. So the risk remains with R2E2, most of the risk, because they monitor the process, they ensure the technical solution is right, the procurement responsibility is on them. So when somebody else takes the risk of the ESCO, that somebody becomes the super ESCO. So this is the scheme of super ESCO, right? Questions about this? Now, some of the people in our government still don't understand it, so it's okay to ask, right? Now, having said this, what I want to say is after, I work for World Bank Institute to recommend the best energy efficiency financing scheme for public buildings for the West Balkan countries. West Balkan is basically ex-Yugoslavia. And after 12 financing schemes that we've described to them as best practice, I get a call from all of them saying, we want to do what Armenia did. It's the best, because when you spend the money, it actually comes back. Until now, none of the funds have been coming back. None of the loans have been repaid. This guarantees the savings come back and repay. Now, what do we, yes? Go back.
The question is regard the payment history. Actually, you look at the few years behind, you see that the average bill is some amount, and then you, knowing that you are going approximately to save by 50%, then you agree that that prorated amount, whatever is being saved, the difference goes to the payment, or what if in that case there is a very warm winter, and that savings is not attributed to the savings but to the warm winter? What is in that?
Then you repay your loan faster. The
No
climate
problem.
is on your side. So that wasn't an
But
issue.
the owner may say that this is not due to that fact that I have to save.
The owner has an incentive to repay the loan faster because the more savings, the faster the loan repays.
Yeah, but
There's no conflict there. But there's people from R2E2 that can answer your question.
R2E2 has elaborated on mechanisms called verification. During the measurement and verification process, the contractor, the ESCO here, is calculating the energy saving given the parameters of that specific season. Like given the comfort level, like in most of the cases, no one has comfort level when we go and start a retrofit. Like they have 50% or less, around 50% comfort level, but after our energy saving measures, they increase it up to 80, 90 or 100%. It's another issue that they don't get too much savings. But the calculations are always done for the prior given comfort level and prior given conditions. Conditions are equal for everybody, and there is no mistake can occur for that specific year. The climate is not affecting from this situation.
Do you monitor the comfort level? Do you have some data logger that records all the time, temperature inside?
We have a lot.
Okay.
There's another
I'm responsible for measurement and verification, and with and from our teaching fund. As a CNVP, Certified Measurement and Verification Professional, we do the audit, we get the baseline for each facility, and from that was the baseline. And after, during the winter, the heating season, we adjust the temperature, the heating surface, the number of people, everything is counted, and we get the adjusted baseline, which we compare to the whatever we had before the energy efficiency measures. So we can compare apple to apple. So we do the baseline adjustment according to the heating season, the outdoor temperature, indoor temperature, whatever.
So in every department, you have some kind of temperature?
Yeah, we have data loggers, we have taken the gas bills, electricity bills, all the available data which can the facility use.
There's another question there.
My question is regarding the ESCO and public agency agreement. So basically, I know how it works here, largely too, but what is international practice? Let's say, what is considered as an under-implementation? Let's say, is there a margin of error? Let's say the ESCO promises to deliver 20%.
You're asking a question about a slide I had to take out because my presentation was too long. There's, this guarantees, and this is where guarantees step in. When there's an issue with a project and the project failed because of external risks, which is why you put in guarantees. R2E2 bears the risk in this case, right? We talked about. Another tool to solve that is insurance. Most of the energy efficiency projects have a small risk of failure if there was something wrong with the energy audit. If you do it well thought, you've corrected for climate, you've adjusted for all the possible fluctuations in comfort, and you've had all your errors taken into account, and all of a sudden still something went wrong, then the energy audit was wrong. So for example, in the Baltic states, in Latvia, we had a project for building energy efficiency. We used insurance, regular insurance for energy audit conclusion. If energy auditor messed up, then he bears the risk. So this is about, you need to think about that in advance and plan for growing tariffs, etc. Well, growing tariffs is actually a good thing for us because you have more savings. Now, in terms of funds, I know I need to wrap up really soon, so let me focus on market potential for this. I want you to take this scheme as one successful scheme and think about Armenia. What happens in Armenian public building situation? I started to develop a NAMA project for climate change. I don't know if you study climate change under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. There's this financial tool called NAMA, Nationally Appropriate Mitigation Actions. For NAMA, we looked at where we can do energy efficiency in our public buildings, and I was perplexed with seeing what I found was that on average basis per year, Armenian public sector spends about $200 million in public buildings for repairs and renovation. And that comes down to about, over $1 billion in a 5-year period of time. Now when I asked them, I'm talking about, revolving PIUs for, municipal, Ministry of Urban Development, PIU, Project Implementation Unit that fixes public agencies, World Bank PIU that builds schools, World Bank PIU that builds hospitals, all Armenia Fund, Social Investment Fund, so many funds that are usually using government money, state funds, or loan money that has been taken by Armenian government and will be repaid by your children or my children. And none of this do any energy efficiency. They just paint the walls, fix roofs, etc. But when you go and do dirty work in the building, that's the best time to do energy efficiency. And none of them do that. Now, what if we could do energy efficiency when we go into these public buildings and get that 54.4% implemented in those public buildings? Our energy is going to grow in consumption in those buildings in the next 5 years, with the prices going and the consumption going up and the energy demand growing. And if we would do energy efficiency, energy consumption would grow substantially smaller, right? Look, in 2016, this is what the level would be. And if we really do energy efficiency, that level can only get to at 2020. There's a lot of new construction too, remember? So it's a growing sector. And similarly, the orange curves, they are showing the associated CO2 emissions, greenhouse gases, which contribute to climate change. And they actually have a market price. 1 ton of CO2 is 15 euros in the market. So if we could do this, sell the reductions, reduce our energy bills, in that case, what we could do is repay those loans that our government takes from sovereign sources, right, with sovereign guarantees, repay them from savings. Because, for example, imagine that we're building a school today from concrete panel. Not only we're using loan money to build that school, we're building an energy inefficient school that's going to have a high energy bill that our Ministry of Education will be paying for all the years to come. While if we invest in energy efficiency and build an efficient school, it will be easier for our government to repay that loan in the future. Because energy efficiency investments, as they grow, they reduce the energy expenditures. This is what allows you to repay the loans. There's other financing types that I wasn't able to talk about this today. Leasing, vendor credits, carbon finance, green pool financing, on-bill payment, and revolving funds. If we ever get a chance, this is what I caught out of my presentation. Questions? By the way, it's estimated that if we, World Bank in 2008 estimated that our best sector to do energy efficiency is public buildings. Average repayment is 2 to 4 years, a quick payback period for public sector. And in general, if we utilize all our energy efficiency potential, Armenia can be saving more than 5% of its GNP, gross national product. So if you think about the fact that saving energy is usually 5 times cheaper than building new energy capacity, this is the sector where a lot of public attention should be drawn. No questions if I'm interested in the topic.
Especially students in my class. There's got to be a question you have.
There's no better question ever. Anything you didn't understand or you want to know?
It was very clear presentation.
Thank you very much. Coming from R2E2, it was supposed to be clear.
If you could go back to your inspirational, inspired slide.
Yeah, the creative picture. You know how much thinking went into this? How many brilliant minds thought about, not my writing, no. The people who invented this are more smarter than I am.
Here, basically, this whole thing is set up for public municipal buildings. You started talking a little bit about how this can migrate into the private sector, because I think the bulk of the savings would be in the private sector. The industry, the agricultural sector, the perhaps the mining sector, perhaps the residential, multi-story residential sector that's privately owned. What are your thoughts about it?
Okay, these have different levels of complications. Industry is relatively easy because there's one owner, and if you can convince an enterprise owner that he can save money, if you can talk to him, he understands you, then you have a deal. Selling energy efficiency as the concept, unless they're not really paying their energy bills, that's the real problem. We've done some energy, not energy, I tend to do resource efficiency audits. They usually don't get it. If you convince them, that means they're actually paying for their energy bill. If they don't pay, it's hard to talk to them. So SME, private sector enterprises, there's a clear saving, and they see that energy efficiency is business of earning money, they understand. It's all about getting the funds to invest. Real problem is multi-apartment buildings, because there's common property problem there. How do I do energy efficiency in a common building where staircase, the roof, and the basement are everybody's, yet nobody's at the same time? This is a big complication. We're working on this, we've done legal review, we've done so much analysis, so many recommendations. We need to fix the legislation. Because if people start working jointly, somebody will need to run around and get agreement from all neighbors. And there's a risk. Somebody will need to take the guarantee. And we're working on this. It's a complicated scheme, and it's probably a 60-minute answer. So the issue is need for guarantee funds. Need for technical assistance, because somebody will need to, like in a big company, you guys do the energy audit. For a residential building, we don't really need an energy audit. Most of the buildings are fairly standard. The solutions are pretty much the same. But we need technical assistance to talk to the people, do the contracting, the legwork, the running around, getting signatures. This is where most of the administrative effort is. And then there's a case study where we did a pilot project in Avan district, showed great results, about 60% savings. So there's a replication potential.
Have you tried to work with residential buildings which are financed from Bilasel or Orange, which are putting their
Banners? Yeah, I know, billboards and antennas and all that stuff on the roofs. You know, surprisingly, that's a very rational question. We have a set of condominium associations. I've devoted, since 2003, I've promised to find a way to finance homeowner associations' energy efficient condominiums. Surprisingly, those condominiums that have those antennas and other things, they have extra revenue. They get other funds, which make them a little more viable. But we don't want to make them the only partners that can survive energy efficiency financing, because then it wouldn't be fair to others that don't have antennas. Okay, we're trying to find a bulletproof scheme through which every homeowner association can apply for a loan and repay. And we've actually been able to calibrate a loan scheme in which, just by collecting their service fees for maintenance, you know, homeowner associations get about 1,000 drums per family per month. Just with that funds, they can actually do about 20-25% energy savings in the whole building by just fixing the staircase windows and entrance doors. Because what you do is when you fix the staircase windows and the door, you have 1 to 2 degrees increase in indoor temperature inside the apartment. Your staircase is not outside cold. That can have an impact of 15 to 20% reduction in your gas bill in the house. That's already a savings. But because the savings, it's the split incentive. The savings happen, the measures, the investment happen in the common space, but the financial savings have at the apartment, there's the split. We can't make them give you money from the savings to their household. So right now, the demo version we're working with, my first success with this was Georg Chauch condominium in Şengavit region, a district of Yerevan. We were able to convince one condominium borrowed a loan. I think it was 2.6 million drums. And what they did is they put this, Euro windows, PVC windows with glass packaging in a common space and a good door. As a result, their energy savings, calculated, we haven't done the monitoring completely yet, is about 40% of the losses in the common space. And on the apartments, it should be about 10 to 15% savings on the apartment bills. 2.6 million drums is enough money that they're gathering from their service fees in 3-year period, which means this condominium is going to repay the loan from their regular maintenance and service fees that they get from their members, regular per square meter collections that they do. If we do this more, what we're going to do is do the learning curve. Come with the banks and make them learn and this goes through Ineco Bank. So Ineco Bank is learning on this experience. If we can do the learning, and if we can also get a guarantee fund, we'll create the security so that this 2.6 million drums become 26 million drums, so they can do the whole building thermal modernization, externally, just do installation for the whole building. Then we will have like that pilot project in Alban, we can have about 60% reduction in energy bills, yes.
And how do some public companies, and are there some mechanisms of cooperation with ESCO and between the end client and ESCO? Because now there are lot of new buildings which have certain operator, and we can have some contract with them to make this renovation.
It's $1 million question. That's a great question. Can an ESCO come into a residential building really ever? It's a yes and no question. Yes, if there's ways to monitor and unify the savings in one spot. Some of the new buildings have a central heating system and one operator. If that's the case, there's one meter for the whole building, then ESCO can actually work. This works in Ukraine and Russia and Kazakhstan, where there's a central heating and 1 meter that calculates how much energy is consumed, which is why we can do this in Ukraine. In Ukraine, we do homeowner association, ESCO, and heat company. It works because ESCO comes in and it shows the savings on that 1 meter that meters the heat coming into the buildings and gets the savings because the building continues charging everybody the old heating bill. The difference goes to pay the ESCO services. In our country, it's complicated when everybody has its own heating system. Gas boilers in every apartment. It's a disconnect. So ESCO, I haven't figured out yet how can individual energy consumption happen on every apartment level. ESCO working separately with 40 meters basically. It can work in new buildings where there's 1 meter and centralized heating, especially like Northern Avenue. They built these horrible, inefficient buildings, and their energy bills have been $40 from the year 1 of the operation, which was 6-7 years ago. In those cases, ESCO can come in and do the savings in the building. There's 1 meter, so they can see the heat savings and keep collecting the old bill. As a result, repay the ESCO services. And if the ESCO can borrow from a bank, has equity, etc., there are short loans that can support this through EBRD, etc., and IFC2, SME kind of loan.
And how to start this? Who should start and how to?
Okay, we had a training with EBRD, Greek company LDK, last month for energy auditors and ESCOs. But we're trying to send a message to these businesses, ESCOs and energy auditors, that this is a service that is commercial. And if you see a client, you go sell your service. Our ESCO companies and energy auditors have a hard time selling their services. What I do if I go to an enterprise, I convince them that what I offer them is going to make them earn money. If they can earn money following my advice. We sell. It's sales, unfortunately. It's a service, so you need to market it and you need to sell it. So you go to a building that is, new building with a boiler and an operator of that boiler, and you say, here's the deal. What I'm going to do, you keep charging your people your $400 a month. Let me come into energy efficiency measures, reduce your bill. The first 5 years, the typical classical ESCO scheme, the first 5 years, the energy savings will happen. Let's share them. The real bill will be $200 per family. You take 100, I take 100 from the savings, for example, shared savings. In 5 years' time, I walk away. Obviously, you do your calculations. I'm making up numbers. In 5 years' time, I walk away. I've repaid my investment from this money I'm getting. I've also made profit. So I walk away. You stay. You keep charging them $400, and you're saving the full $200 because the bill is less. And when 10 years are completed, you start charging them the true amount, for example, $200 per square meter, but it's possible that the bill would go up. As a result, in a whole, the building will be consuming substantially less energy. And the best thing is you will get prepared for the growth in tariffs. Tariffs are going up, and if we're not prepared, then we'll be facing a high energy bill. Every time the government subsidizes energy cost, I don't know if you remember, you're probably too young to even worry about this. Our government has been subsidizing gas tariff in a period of time between 2007 and 2010. We even sold an asset, a national asset, the 5th block of the Yerevan thermal power plant, just to give $180 million in gas subsidy so that people don't feel the tariff has come up for different reasons, political, election, etc., etc. But what happened is then the tariff went up and people were unprepared. If the tariff goes up smoothly, people understand what they're using is expensive and growing in price. and learn how to manage and reduce. Every time I remember that $180 million, I'm thinking, I wish that money went into R2E2. The multiplier effect since 2007 until now would have been humongous. We would have saved so much energy since then. But that didn't happen. It was a subsidy. Everybody, including the biggest houses, the richest people in the country, got cheap gas for 4 years in a row until the 180 million ran out. So it's important that the energy price growth is realistic. You need to understand it's a fossil fuel, it runs out, it's strategic, it's a national energy security issue. So the less we consume, the better for the household, for the country, for political stability, national economic security, and national defense security as well. So energy saving has so many reasons we should do it.
And the environment.
And the environment, absolutely.
Usually, when you stage a project, when you offer the builder to have central unit heating system, we usually don't want to do this because it's expensive for him and it will make the price of any square meter of his apartment higher than others. So you want to make just each boiler in per room and make the project cheaper.
Sure.
And if there are some mechanisms to explain him that if you will make this central boiler system, that there can be other companies who will invest in your project and you will go out for this case. So we will go in this way.
Here's
So
the
how
deal.
to connect with investor and ESCO and pay you.
The real problem is not how they're building. It's what our consumers want to buy. Most of the people, I do a lot of lectures. I ask, when was the last time you were buying or looking at real estate? What were the questions you asked? They ask where the apartment is, what's the price of square meter, and that's probably it. Sometimes they also ask if there's a maintenance fee and how big it is. What they don't ask is the energy performance of this building. In Europe, and we also have that now by regulation and standards, buildings must have an energy label. If you go to an appliance store like Zigzag and you look at a fridge or refrigerator or a washer or a dryer, it's going to have an energy label, green, orange, and red lines, which shows if you're going to be consuming high energy or low energy if you buy this equipment. And you look at the price and then, this is about the same price, but that's class D, and this is grade A. I'm going to buy the energy efficient one. The same should really be for housing. In that case, if we also ask the developer is, what is the square meter, what's the price, where is this place, and what class is this building? Is it grade A, B, C, or F? An average panel building is class E, which is horrible. It has about 200 kilowatt energy consumption per square meter per year. In Gyumri, it can be about 300. It's a colder place. After energy efficiency, our buildings go down to 74, and that's not energy efficient, that's C minus. That's all that our construction norms require, C minus. Yet most of our buildings are not even C minus, they're class E. So if we, as consumers, remember the client is always right. If we tell the market that's all we want, in a competitive industry, our real estate market has hard time selling. There's a lot of excess housing that doesn't sell. If they could also offer efficient housing with an efficient heating system, with insulation, if our clients would be educated to ask about it, if all our new construction would be required to have an energy label, the real estate market, imagine the brokers, they would say, oh, I'm advertising, you should buy this because it's in that location, here's a competitive price, and yet it's, possibly, say, $100 more expensive per square meter, but it's class A or B, unlike that other one that's class D. So you understand why the difference in price of $100 per square meter, what is attributed to. So you're buying the house where your upfront capital investment will be $100 more per square meter, but your operation and maintenance cost living in that house, your energy bill, is going to be substantially smaller, right? It's just like our poor people buy an Iranian heater, gas heater. This is $400. And the Czech one is $550. But that Czech heater would cost them 20,000 drums less per month in the winter. In the first winter, they'd get that difference, $150 that they needed, they thought they didn't have. But they did have because they had to pay the bigger bill, right? Every month the gas bill is going to be bigger. So what you need to do is buy that slightly more expensive asset, either a heater or an apartment or a car, right? If you get educated, you won't buy those gigantic cars that burn 24 liters of gasoline, per 100 kilometers. You start thinking about saving your money with a smaller car and spend 12 or 10, liters of gasoline per 100 kilometers because you're smart about your money. You ask that question. Men go buy cars and ask about fuel consumption, but men go buy houses, don't ask about energy performance. I don't get it. We need to ask this question to send that signal to the real estate market that that's what we want. A ridiculous example. I love salmon. After life in the US, I started cooking salmon all the time. And I go to SOS and there's never raw salmon that I can cook for my kids. So I started doing this mystery shopping thing. Every time I go to SOS, I'm like, do you have raw salmon? I'd like salmon filet. They're like, we don't have that. I'm like, well, it would be nice to have it. And every time I went to SOS for 2 years, I would have this blank face. I'm like, can I talk to the supply manager? Yeah. Why don't you have raw salmon? I asked that question 51 times, and now SOS offers salmon filet. Why? Because they thought 51 people wanted it. If we could all ask the right question. Remember, purchasing power is the market winner is the one with the money. Those going to buy an asset, asking the right question, send a signal to the supplier. Supplier is the developer. Tell them that's what you want. You're going to be in the real estate market 5 years from now because you're going to be making decent money when you graduate. So ask the right question. Or you select your home, that's the worst case.
One more,
I
two
think
more
this-
questions and let's
I
wrap
think
up.
this is just a matter of time because I noticed that, for example, in Canada, Toronto, people, even investors and also people who are buying real estate, they were trying to purchase LEED category buildings.
Yes.
Because, first of all, they understand, first
Well,
of
I'm
all,
impressed you know what's lead category.
yes, so basically yes. But the question is here, there is a debate whether these buildings, the investment into these buildings is much more expensive or not. What is your, because...
Well,
there are
that's my
different
painful
opinions
issue
about it.
because I dream of establishing a GBC in Armenia, Green Building Council, and I've been talking to a lot of partners. Maybe someday we will start it. I'm helping GBC in Georgia, Green Building Council in Georgia, and we're starting Green Building Voluntary Certification Scheme in Georgia through BREEAM and LEED. So I'm impressed you know what that is. LEED is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. So buildings can have a label. Building energy label is what I was just talking about. I'm sorry I didn't have it on my slides. Like I said, I erased 22 slides before you guys came, so I can... LEED is just one form of a label. There's a lot of analysis about LEED being a luxury form of certificate because LEED is not just about energy efficiency. It's wastewater treatment, using rainwater, handicapped access, using environmentally friendly materials. It's really quite expensive to even build LEED, but even certifying and decommissioning LEED is an extra cost. It can make your construction expensive by up to 8%. That's a significant cost to just making it LEED, right? With the commissioning, etc. The commissioning, etc. So question is, but then there's a lot of analysis by the green building professionals themselves that it's a common misconception that green buildings are expensive buildings. It pays back in the long run for the environmental performance, etc. We haven't looked at the green building market in Armenia, whether there's perspective. The perspective, as far as I understand, but we have in this room the one lead expert in Armenia that actually is an associate professional, so Armenia should probably be telling better than I do. As far as we'll look at Georgia, like I said, I do this in Georgia. In Georgia, we look at green building, LEED and BREEAM certification. The only client we think we can sell this to so far is the high-class client. Big transnational corporations, 5-star hotels, luxury building. Because getting into that is an expensive start. I think for our realistic existing market, most of these transnationals, big corporations like Coca-Cola, Radisson, Marriott, etc., they do it for the green image because this green image brings them money. Talking about multi-apartment housing and universities and schools, making them green can only have a, environmental image, educating the public image, setting the style, the tone, the example. That's the true message. Cost-wise, mass, green building in a public sector and, residential sector. I think in Armenia it's a little bit behind the other mountain. We have a long time to even make them energy efficient. You know, getting into the green is my dream come true. I don't see it happening in the next 5 to 10 years, unfortunately. I think we need to worry about imminent need of saving energy and importing less Russian gas and dealing with our nuclear ambition and understanding where we're going to be in 20 years. What if we're not going to have any nuclear? There's more bigger strategic issues, and lead is still that a little bit, you know, oxymoron, which is a little too sexy to be commercial right now.
Thank you a lot for the brief, useful lecture. It's not a question, but just as a technical guy, I completely agree and believe in the importance of developing a precise technical and financial model for energy efficient and renewable energy projects. However, we do really need other mechanisms, other, let's say, parameters to guarantee the whole idea. This is where management tools, this is where public awareness comes to guarantee our efforts. This is where the gamification comes to motivate the stakeholders of our projects. And moreover, to have a self-sustainable system for regardless of the country, Armenia, Middle East countries or whatever, we really need to develop let's say, comprehensive value chain to minimize the dependency on other countries. I do really hope that AUA, Mr. Allen, and also you may take the initiative to look at the other side of the story. I do really believe in the technical issues, the precisity of the technical offers, the whole package. We really need to look from other side. I used to work in completely energy efficient buildings back into the road, but we weren't able to save energy and save our bills unless we implemented some management system and also aware our colleagues to use energy efficiently.
Right. Yeah, I think I understand the question.
It was just a message.
Sure. Well, yeah, let me comment on that, and perhaps it will be a good way to wrap up. Yes, awareness is number one. Awareness is important, and outreach, because unless every player, wherever he or she is, best and the quickest energy efficiency is behavioral change. And energy, it's no cost to low cost measures. Our behavioral change is energy management, ISO 50001, blah, blah, blah. These are the great things that don't even require decent investment. I agree, and with the awareness, when we passed the law on energy saving and renewable energy in 2003, I was in the room of the, Deputy Minister Ari Galstan saying, so now in Article 23, you actually say you're going to support energy efficiency and awareness. Can we get some free public airtime on a television, and I'll get grant money to do the PSAs for you? And unfortunately, the answer was that public TV doesn't give us free time on television. I heard that's recently changed.
No.
Well, let me comment on that. I was actually going to comment, you're talking about reform. You're talking about, cooling the market. You're talking about behavioral and mentality change. Those are big words and big things that don't happen in one day. Passing the energy saving law and energy efficiency was the greatest thing in my life. And because we created Energy Efficiency Council with 43 stakeholders at the table just talking about energy efficiency, and one government official taking political leadership. When they ask me how do you do energy efficiency reform, my question back is, do you have a champion? Because if you don't, it's usually one person show. In every country, in Serbia, in Macedonia, in Yugoslavia, wherever I do this, I have one champion that believes in my reform, that pushes my agenda. In our country, we've been blessed to have a great Minister of Energy, and we have another champion here, City. From the first day he came to work, he writes on his Facebook page, which is, the only thing people read these days, social media. Changing behavior and believing things. I haven't had a chance to thank you for this. In the energy saving renewable energy law, we have an article about net metering. People who produce renewable energy should be able to, barter it, exchange it with the electric network. We haven't been able to exercise it just once in the last 11 years because of taxation. There's a VAT mess.
It
You
took
know,
us about
There's
1 year.
one champion comes into the room, takes leadership, goes, kicks the right door, and pushes it open. This is what we need. People who believe in that. Thank you. And you, above all, that's what I tell my students. You graduate, you become a champion where you are. You go the right, knock at the right door, do the mentality change. Changing behavior is the hardest thing. We spent $920,000 on an outreach campaign in Ukraine. By the way, it was all corporate social responsibility. All I did is pay a salary for one PR person in my office, a genius obviously. $920,000 of public outreach campaign, completely CSR money. And as a result, when we did the post-evaluation, they said, out of the people that have seen our campaigns, 87 have understood it, 87% understood it, 61% took action. What this means is a major success factor. What we said that to them, they understood, actually changed something in their life. In Ukraine, our message was, save energy, save Ukraine. Here, same story. Save energy, save Armenia. Otherwise, we're going in the wrong direction. For a country that has a growing economy, growing energy demand, and 0 grams of fossil fuels, we should really be thinking about this. And many people are. I hope you do that wherever you go, because being energy smart is part of the business, and it's also your patriotic, just business patriot, country patriot, your community patriot. You do it wherever you are.
And your pocket patriot. Yeah?
Yes, why not? Saves you money. If you don't have time for energy efficiency, you have no money, and you have no time to earn money. I don't believe in that. People always have time to earn money.
Thank you very much, Astghine. This has been a great talk.
My
Very
pleasure.
inspiring, very informative, provocative at times. If we could go back to that slide.
Yeah, I'm so proud of this. This was my burning midnight oil, 2
For all
a.m.
the AUA students or students or life students, if you want to do your thesis projects, I think figuring out how to replace this with other sectors, that could be a really interesting thesis topic or project.
I'll help you think about it. Get there.
Yeah. Figuring out, take the perspective of an industry, take the perspective of a multifamily building, and try to figure out how this model could work. Right? That could be a
Can we
great
have the slide?
You can even have the longer version.
Yeah, she's shared it with me, I'll share it with her.
He has it.